Okay, what I thought I'd do as a council member, we don't have the pro tem or the mayor here, I'd go ahead and note that we'll start the meeting at this time. If they would take noted attendance, let's go ahead. I'll pass it off to the city staff.
Go right ahead.
Okay. Well, so thanks for meeting on a special night to talk about the intersections at 66th. So Jeff's here, and he's done most of what we're going to be going over tonight, because the number one thing is to kind of go over who we've talked to, follow up on any questions that were lingering, and then go over everybody we talked to and kind of their reaction. Jeff was at pretty much all those meetings. I wasn't, but he just got off a plane. So I'm prepared to do the presentation. He's here if there's any questions. So
This is saying you just got off the boat, but
I don't know, yeah. So I'll go over and review everything, and if there's any questions, just feel free to ask them as we go along. Obviously, and same with you guys, if I miss anything that you want to add, let's just have it open. So the ARP question, Councilmember Elliott brought up that he noticed, I put it in there, the San Diego had the 5 to 2 lane conversion, claimed it was still moving 23,000 cars. We looked, right now, this is the road, so they must have put in the median and made parking on that same roadway. This is parallel parking, that's not cars waiting to go. And then they've got a bike accommodation over there, it looks like. It's a grid system similar to Richfield, so it's been diverted is our best guess. The most current count we could find was 18,000. So it must have been 23,000 when they converted it. Is our best guess, but this is all we had on that.
Isn't that our goal for 66th Street? To drop it from 22,000 to 17 or 18?
With the crosstown expansion, that's what we're
Just making them
hoping
go
for.
somewhere else. I mean, if crosstown's not going to work, I mean, what we want to show them, 66 isn't an option to get from Xerxes to Cedar.
That's called constraining the roadway. And I don't know if Maureen wants to talk about that.
So, yeah, I think, this has kind of been addressed by our Director of Transportation, James Grube. The city had approached the county with respect to constraining the system, which is basically what you would be doing to put a 3-lane section in this road. And what that, interpretation is that you're forcing that volume somewhere else. Now, some of that volume is coming off of 62, which we know. It's a reliever, it's functionally classified as a reliever. And from the county's perspective, that is one of its duties. And that's also one of the reasons it's funded heavily from the feds. So the $8 million, I mean, the arterial reliever classification, that has to be classified and function like that to secure that money. So that's kind of an important deal. And then, there's just the county's perspective that it is a bigger, it does serve the greater Hennepin County area as such, being county road, functionally classified as a reliever, arterial reliever.
That is a fiction from the get-go. And all I'm saying is, a heavily traveled county road that is, 2.5 miles total in length? Come on. That it's, what it is it's got people getting off crosstown because it doesn't work. And so what it does, it's a 2.5 mile road from end to end, maybe 3 miles.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah, I know. I mean, as far as the length, you could look at certainly arterial systems that are longer and provide, a greater trip, and, that's a whole discussion, but this is currently classified as, and it's the reason it got its funding, and the county had considered it, and at this point, and I'll just maybe talk about one thing. The one point where we're talking about constraint was the one segment used in the application as the most congested segment. So it's not even like, we could point and divert and talk about, it was like, this is literally the one section that we used to qualify for the funding. Now, I mean, yeah, the funding, we're going to go in for a STIP amendment because of the project and the scope change, because of some of the things that we're talking about doing for the project. So, that funding isn't guaranteed at this point.
And I'll just add that Hennepin County does a lot of three-lane conversions. They're not opposed to them or adverse to them at all. I mean, they've got miles and miles of conversions under their belt. And like we've said before, that we're huge on doing it too. And we looked at it as staff as well, and it just isn't, even with the future crosstown, it was questionable at all those studies. I mean, we paid for our own traffic study to look at it on top of theirs and check theirs and all that. And it just, I think the level of service of Richfield and constraining it in such a way and not even knowing the future of the crosstown and how that will impact it was not, we weren't comfortable recommending it because we definitely would have escalated it if we were going to push too hard, push back on the county. So that's my 2 cents. Anything else on this one? Okay, Norway, this is something that the mayor had brought to us, not at one of the council work sessions. She had scheduled an appointment with staff, and she came in with some graphics of the roundabouts in Norway, and some of them had removed maybe 150 feet from the intersection. They'd have a signalized crosswalk, and then some of them were a lot like ours. And so what we did at her request was contact those in Norway, and we actually took a while to get them to respond, but I did get a response from one of their officials from the highway administration, and so the pedestrians have a right of way, and the reason I have that here is because in Australia they don't, which was another thing we followed up on, which means that cars must yield for the pedestrians. Typically, they do not use signals for the ped crossings, but in a few instances they have when they've had high volume roads and they've had high speed. And then in that case, they separate it because they don't want the signal too close to the roundabout. And then normally they have their ped crossings 15 to 30 feet from the circulating area, and that they find it's good, the safety is good with pedestrians there. And then he went on to say that in general, they're just safer than other intersections, and he provided me this graphic in an email. So it just shows the roundabout a little bit lower than a three-legged traffic signal, which I think is consistent with how we're approaching our roundabout design here. And I don't know if anybody's got any other questions. Yeah.
Did they tell you how far their ped crossings are out of the roundabout? I mean, how far?
Yeah, they've got 15 to 30 feet.
15, and what are ours now? I guess I get on.
Similar to that, I don't know the exact footage.
Yeah, right now Portland is about one car length, so probably around the 15-foot range. What we would like to do on our new ones, and some of the recommendations coming out on new roundabout design is to push it to like that 30-foot, 2-car length.
So ours are about 15 now, we'd push it another car length?
Yeah.
Okay,
so
thanks.
Simple rule is 1 car length now, we're going to go to 2.
That makes more sense, thanks.
Any more questions on Norway? Australian, she mentioned they had theirs set back, and to look at that, the reason behind that is because pedestrians do not have the right-of-way at roundabouts for some reason or another. They move them back to make them mid-block crossings so that they do have the right-of-way, just to establish that right-of-way for the pedestrians. And which is interesting because then, I don't know if we talked about Carmel. Did we watch a video?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, so we talked to them. We called them with some questions about how they do their ped crossings, where they're located, what problems are they seeing, what things have they learned? Because they've got more than 60 roundabouts. They started putting them in the 90s. They do not have a yield for peds law at all. So pedestrians don't even have the right-of-way there, which was interesting. But we talked to their staff, and their mayor was going to contact Mayor Gattell. I don't know if that connection happened. I was going to ask her today. But they had this dog bone, so this is their dog bone. And apparently, they had signals there before, or was it unsignalized? That's what I didn't catch.
It might have been a new interchange. They were grade separating. This is thank you. This is a kind of an expressway, so to speak, highway that they're grade separating the interchanges. So this might have been a completely new interchange that went in as a roundabout first as opposed to a signal.
Well, their comment was, though, that they would have events at the high school, which must be one of these quadrants.
Yeah.
And they had problems getting people from the residential area to the high school. It was on foot, and so it was kind of, during events, would be chaotic, and it sounded like a safety concern to me. He said the first day they opened up, he sat out there and watched it, and it just worked great, so. Anyway, that was what we learned from them, and I think I have another one. Okay, so those were the follow-ups from.
Chris, I'm just curious, I'm assuming that I can't tell if it's a pink or a salmon color, those are the walk, I can see the crosswalks and those are.
Oh, yeah, this would be a walkway, yep.
Do they have, the bikes and pedestrians share that walkway?
It looks like they do. Yep.
How's that working for them?
That would be a question I could ask them. Yeah, it looks like it's pretty wide, but I could call and ask them again. Okay, any other questions? I'm gonna write that down. So then now I'm just gonna go over comparing the signal to the roundabouts, because there's two options for these major intersections on the table for next Tuesday. The red here is a strip taking for the signal. And then here's the roundabout, you can see clips the corner here. And what we've done is we threw the roundabouts in at the immediate area, and so anything downstream was just kind of tied into whatever it was at the signal. I don't know if we would need all that width or not, I'm not positive. I mean, that's a final design detail at that point. We didn't want to final design both alternatives. But you can see there's similar impacts to this property, which gets the biggest hit. We would do a one-way, you could do a one-way drive and do angled parking. I thought I had that in one of these. The green is just kind of showing additional space you could get with the roundabout that is normally taken by the road. We're also shifting it over here. I don't know where that one went with the diagonal parking, but this is just the level of service, and this is all stuff you guys have seen before, so just a review that the roundabout is showing a little bit better operation than the signal. Any questions on Nicollet at this point? I'll get to the property owners after we just go. I'm just reviewing the geometry right now. And okay, Lindale. Another is taking here of a strip that gets a little bit into the Houlihan's patio. I think the red is taking, right, Maury? The pink shading. And then you can see the big hit here is on this corner. The curb line is like right here, and now the new curb line's here, so you get this triangle. And then we configure that. The right-of-way doesn't change on the edges, you get a little bit more space down here. Essentially the same on either one here. You get it at the corner again, reconfigure the parking. So they're similar. We lose approximately two parking stalls on that one with the roundabout. And then the level of service again is similar. Roundabouts operate for cars a little better.
So just for clarification, you said on that one, you said Houlihan's outdoor patios impacted by the signal?
Yes, I'm not sure how much.
Do they lose the whole patio?
I
or-
don't think the whole patio.
Oh, no.
It's just that you could probably shake hands with the driver? or is
Yeah,
that
and again, that
It's a cycle
level-
path, or
yeah,
a cycle
that-
track.
what- Oh, okay, I
Yeah.
get where you,
Moves
okay,
in a little bit.
okay, so,
So I'm sure the curb, I mean, you can see where the existing curb is about in the same place.
Yeah, and I would just add that, this is it was the preliminary layout where we held the 6-foot boulevards and we put in one-way cycle track and all of the entire wish list. So in design, if we're 2 feet into Houlihan's patio, we're gonna make an adjustment to avoid that. I mean, the expense to get 2 feet, the county would definitely try to avoid that. So we'll want to minimize through the detailed design the impacts along the whole corridor, not just at that location.
So this would mean possibly losing the boulevard, right? Or something along those lines.
Just
in
a
this
heads
area.
up, we might want to look at our ordinances, because we used to have a restriction on bicycles in the Hub and Lindale area, and whether they could be on sidewalks and paths, so we might want to look at that.
Now he brings it up. Yeah. We'll bring that to the next council meeting.
Well, just letting you know,
I'm
because
just-
we used to have complaints all the time in the
Yeah.
Hub when people were driving, and we had that law passed on business districts where bicycles could be, and we told them they had to be in the streets versus on sidewalks and pathways, so.
Okay. Anything else on Lindell for this portion of it? At the ramps, the signals up top, there's, the roundabouts are wider. I don't really have much to say here. There's a taking underneath here, a potential taking. I have another slide to talk about that. Still operating a little bit better, except for maybe this westbound movement. Looks like a lot better here. But that's what that looks like. I don't know that there's much for right-of-way takings anywhere else on this one, is there? Aside from that corner? So this is showing if we were to bring this alleyway and tuck it in right there, we'd have to replace that garage or pay to have it replaced. And then reconfigure that, maybe doing a land swap. So there's some potential to not take that property. You know, I don't know, when they spoke with her, she seemed a little bit, it was hard to read whether or not she was wishing she had been taken back in the day. But even if she wanted to go, I don't know what we would do there. I mean, if we wanted to save that lot, we would, it looks like we maybe could.
Yeah, I
If
think
you guys
that-
are willing to do that.
The main point is that the, you know, if the homeowner wanted to reconfigure the lot in the garage, that possibility exists, without having to do a full take.
She gets a new garage, a deal, huh?
She had
Is
paid-
it,
yeah,
is
paid
it
for
possible, we may have alleys, I'm not sure, that dead end? Do we have to come out on that side? I know it does now, but does it
Yeah,
have to?
it would leave a pretty long dead-end alley, but it's something we could look at. I know that this configuration actually is a big improvement from what's out there today. Right now, that garage is right at the corner of a 90-degree bend.
Yeah.
And we get frequent complaints about, you know, I can't see around that alley corner
Okay.
for cars coming. So, you know, I guess if there's a silver lining with this layout, it's that bend is taken out of that alley.
I don't think this really improves the location of the alley today with the road. I mean, it's tight. It's probably even tighter than it's shown here. I don't know. It's really tight there.
Yeah, right now the alley is almost the back of sidewalk, which is at the back of curb, so it's right in a row.
I have a question. Just traditionally, how has that worked with, have we worked with a homeowner that's going to be affected and try to understand what they would prefer? And I guess, how does that interplay traditionally work?
Well, you would normally start conversations about the cities looking at these alternatives, say Richfield Parkway when we did the connection. We reached out to them early. We didn't know what we were going to do, but we wanted to make sure they knew they could potentially, I mean, we had options that showed them as potential takes. We had options that didn't. And they were favorable in the end. Initially, nobody wants, I mean, it's a shock. So, and so you just kind of, I think once people think about it, depending on how they sit, they either want to move on. I mean, that's a lot of cases in Richfield. There's been cases where they're ready for that next chapter, and so now this is actually helping them move on. But some people don't want to go. I don't know if it makes a difference. We could definitely speak
Yeah,
to
and
her and try
I
to get.
mean, you know, we have yet to go back to this homeowner with this, you know, alternative. When we initially met with her, she made the comment that she was the only one of the 4 quadrants that didn't get purchased under the, when they redid the interchange, and she wishes MnDOT would have bought it out then, but, you know, that's about the extent of her comments, so you can't really say, you know, oh, she wants to get bought out or anything, but, you know, we'll bring this back to her, and at least show her that option that, you know, there's various things that can be done here, so, and get her more of a read on what her, you know, what her thoughts are.
Yeah, and what we would probably do if she didn't want to be total take, or if we didn't purchase that property, would be to pay for her to relocate her garage. We would not do it for her. So, I mean, we'd get estimates, and so she would have the choice, I suppose, if she actually wanted to build it. But the city wouldn't want to be in charge of the contractor and make sure that he did a good job and follow up, you know, with any of that stuff. We'd just pay her to be able to do that.
So it sounds like she was once favorable to a total take and may slide with that again, or?
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's just in passing the comments that we got when she at least first saw that layout and saw the possibility, and some of those comments, you know, that, you know.
The other thing, I think it's coming, well, the Emerson Avenue access here, there's a difference between the two there. Maybe you've heard some people talking about that as a reason to stick with signals. And the other difference between the two, besides the roundabout and signal, is the county is going to keep this, would make this a multi-use path, I think, starting here, Murray. You can see the cycle track and sidewalk over here, converting it to a shared use path here, just to avoid taking messing with the alley there.
Yep, so the approach there would be, you'd have the one-way cycle track westbound to Emerson, and then it goes to that, like a 12-foot wide, you know, shared use space, still protected, you still have a curb. They can choose, bicyclists could choose to use the right turn lane or take you know, behind the curb. And then when you pass the ramp, you get into a protected, kind of a more of a designated space for each user. But, yeah, I mean, when we look at that property from a signal standpoint, getting into that alley, that wall, that noise wall, and, you know, it really is worth a site visit, you know, even when you look at the previous layout, because to stand there and think of, you know, the alleyway being, you know, where it could be with the roundabout would be tough. But if the owner, you know, absolutely wants to make that happen and wants to stay, you know, the county's typical kind of approach to that is the costs add up, and then when it hits the value of the property, we do a total acquisition. You know, that's kind of the standard approach to it. So, you know, that would all have to be worked through. And
So Councilmember Howard asked about crashes specifically here, right?
Yeah, I mean, just to the Emerson, in particular, I have.
Oh, Emerson.
From
The Emerson exit? you're talking?
Do you
Well, just the
have
folks that live on
Emerson
Emerson Lane, that I've heard from several folks, and I'd met with some staff to talk about some of those questions, but thought it's
Okay.
important to probably ask a
Okay.
few of those too.
And I don't know if
Is
you
that
have
appropriate
Emerson
now, or-
specifically. Oh, you do? Okay, well, I know that this was this intersection's ramp intersection was a concern at one point, but go ahead, Maury. Yeah, now would be a good time, I think, if that's okay.
just Emerson?
Well, or just review the whole thing. I would.
So I'll just touch on the ramp locations themselves. So we had data from,
pass
and
anything
yeah, that's fine. Could pass, yes. So we had data kind of in two groups. One was from 2007 to 2009, and then the next one was 2010 to 2012. And so in the first data group, I think there was 62 traffic on it, detour traffic and stuff, while the crosstown was under construction. So there was kind of a break there in the data. But the west ramp was above average crash rates. So we take the average crash rates for similar facilities, and the west ramp was slightly above that. So there's a little definition I think it's 3 or 4 pages in that'll, you can take a look at. But basically, when it's around that average, you chalk it up to the randomness of crashes. There's not really a red alert or a red flag. It's just, hey, you take a second look, but it's when you exceed the critical rate that you start to get concerned. So the west ramp was above average, the east ramp was below average for the 2007 to 2009.
Where am I looking here? I'm sorry.
Oh, that's just the first cover.
page.
You can look at, there's a yellow dot
So you got it.
and a green dot.
Oh, just on the very
guy
first
right
page.
First page, sorry.
Okay.
And there's a legend kind of in the lower left. So, if you look at at 35 there, it's yellow and green, so yellow indicating just slightly above average, green is
Thank you,
is
yeah.
below. If you go to the third page, that's the 10 to 12 data. And those happen to be both below the average, so those are shown as both green.
10 to 12 are both below.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you want to look at, since we're talking about all the locations, if you just go ahead and flip between Lindale was below for all the data set, and then Nicollet was above for the earlier data set when it was detour at higher volume, and below for after. So basically, that's just kind of some crash rate review. I included some additional information that showed, I went into MnDOT's crash mapping system and showed, I just drew a rectangle around, where the data was collected, and then did a crash summary. So I think what was a concern from staff and through the process was that, there were, even though the rates might not have, raised any flags, there are severe crashes happening out there. And the numbers were in that 30 to 35% of the crashes that are happening there are injury or potential injury crashes, and that, there is a cost associated with that kind of a crash. That's at the ramps. And all that data's in here at Lindale and at Nicollet, all 3 of the locations.
Do you have a
for the
sense of
locations.
what's average for severe versus, with all this stuff, it seems like it's trying to understand, what's...
Yeah, we looked at a severity crash rate, and I'll dig through my stack here. I didn't get that into yours, and then as far as Emerson, I'll search for that. As far as Emerson, I just pulled all the data that is in MnDOT's system, and that started in 2004 through current, and there's eight total crashes there.
Okay, since from 2004.
Yeah, so it's a pretty low risk site. I did a quick crash rate calc, and it's really low. And I just compared that. We didn't crush all the numbers for criticals and all that stuff, but it's going to fall below that. So.
Can I make a point to that, though? If you look at that Emerson, it's not a through street, it's a dead-end bubble there. And it being a cop, most of the ones I wrote there were the residents trying to sneak across four lanes of traffic there. Remember we used to have to put them tall sticks up so people wouldn't get into that lane to go south on 35W? They requested that. But I sat there one day with a motorcycle, and every resident that comes out there is really taking their life in their hands, trying to cross 4 lanes of traffic. And I know with a roundabout, it's going to be nearly impossible for them to try to, I'm loving the part that you got the island. The roundabout would be too efficient to put a cut hole through there for them to try to sneak through.
Yeah, the majority of the comments we've gotten about this location were, and I would say 90% of the comments we got were about closing that access.
Yep.
Mainly because, like you said, it's a dead-end street, so it's the only way in and out. And they don't want to lose that left out is really the biggest movement for them. And when you look at the crash data, the crashes are almost all that left out, because you can, get across 2 lanes and now you're stuck out in the middle, and if there's a car coming, that's where the trouble is. So
That's why they blocked that turn slot. That was their refuge.
right.
For waiting for.
Right, so it's, that is the biggest crash concern in terms of that intersection, regardless of numbers, but under, I guess if they're, that's a risk they're willing to take under the signal condition, even though that isn't as safe a condition.
Because the signal really only gave them a brief break, because if it stopped eastbound traffic, it opened up people coming off the ramp turning, and it was
Right,
short.
and there's under the signal condition that's out there today, there's a sign that we get complaints that it's hard to see, but they're in the only locations we can put them is the no turn on red for the ramps. And it's, I think the thing that's most confusing is at certain times a day.
It is, 6 to 10.
Right.
Yeah.
Is it right up there?
So that's, the intent of that is to provide that break so that if there's a gap in traffic on 66, there's nobody turning to fill that gap. One of the concerns that we heard besides that access was the number of gaps that would be there, because everyone knows the roundabout creates fewer gaps. Our modeling of this dog bone configuration did go out past Emerson, and so we could see how many gaps there would be. And the biggest thing is because you're only making a right turn, you don't need that full gap to get across the whole roadway. So there is enough gaps where you could make that right turn, fairly easily, in the grand scheme of things.
My only concern is then they have to do a full U-turn at the next light, which is Ray Drive there. And, I don't know how else you'd fix that, because a lot of people have a hard time doing a U-turn from a single lane and get into the left lane and that, but.
Right, yeah,
Stoplight.
this shows the U-turn at.
This is not at the stoplight, that's even worse,
Yeah, I
sir.
was gonna say, and
Yeah,
they're
that-
coming off a curve too.
Yeah, and
That's not a good traffic
That
maneuver.
is something that I have heard, when I talk to folks, that was one of the common questions.
I'd
If safety
agree.
is the issue here, the safety concerns about making that U-turn where there's the curve in the road there.
Right, the sight lines for Linwood coming out there, that curve comes into play. When you're making the U-turn there, that sight line is not obstructed at all. So between having a left turn to do the maneuver plus the sight lines, we feel that wouldn't be a concern. But certainly when you're coming out of Linwood there, that's where the curve comes into play.
And they got the same problem, I'll just interject this, that they did on Emerson. They're still trying to come out of Linwood to make a left turn onto 4.
Yep, I agree.
Yeah, they get maybe a little break because of Ray Drive, if that stops their traffic getting across to go westbound, but I'd almost like to see a right turn only out there too, so.
Yeah, this would be, obviously there's no signal at Linwood, but if you compared this to down at 76th Street, where there's that condition next to where is it Lakeshore or Humboldt comes out, makes those tight turns, comes out to a median situation, those are people all take a right and then do a U-turn at the light. This would be a similar situation to that, with the exception that Linwood, there's not a signal, but
I found that information regarding the critical rate and kind of how that compares to the critical severity rate, and it's lower. It's actually on page 4 of that handout. And you can see there's 2 columns there. There's the severity rate that's calculated for the intersections, and then the critical severity rate. So it's, it's below that.
So
So the rate itself we wouldn't look at that and be concerned from a severity rate. It doesn't change the fact when you look through the 3 intersections or 4 locations that there's, 50-some crashes. So it does start to become a little bit difficult and, when you're weighing it. But from a rate standpoint, kind of standard intersection approach, it isn't a flag.
The only issue I have with that, if you did an actual traffic count of cars going out there and then you weighed it with the actual accidents, you'd see it'd be pretty high if you figure out how many cars are actually coming off that street.
well, and I guess that's, one way of looking at, so if you compared the traffic on 66, 8 crashes isn't that much,
Right.
but the number of people on, considering all of those 8 likely are Emerson Avenue cars, that's out of the number of households on that street.
Right.
That's where our concern would be as well.
Yeah.
Anything else I'm going to back up. Okay, so, anything else on the ramps at this point? Okay, so then this, December 3rd, Transportation Commission made a recommendation to go with roundabouts at the intersections we're talking about here, including moving the peg crossings a little bit further away and including those rectangular rapid flashing beacons at all the legs, and then maintain the signals at the more minor signal locations along the corridor. So after that, when we had a study session, there was a list attached to your memo, I believe, of everything that all the groups we've talked to, Jeff and Mike mostly. Property owners I'm going to go through first, and then the community groups and the public agencies and the commissions. So property owner meetings, this is orange because that meeting's not happening until next Tuesday. I don't know if you want to talk to us since you're here. Okay.
Might as well. So we met with the property owners at Lindale and Nicollet, and as Kristen mentioned, the hub shopping area. Those are out-of-state owners. We're actually finally connected with their leasing agent, who we're meeting with next week. But the other quadrants there we've met with, and I would say, well, the ones on the east, north and south on the east side, are both the same owner and same leasing company. And in general, you know, there was three gentlemen that we met with, and two of them were, you know, here's our concerns, but either way we can, you know, live with it, and we see advantages either way. The third one just didn't like roundabouts, so he joked about it himself. You know, I'm old-fashioned, I don't like the roundabouts. But obviously their main concerns, on the north side, they really had no concerns, and actually saw some improved access potentially because of the right-in, right-out situation by the Dairy Queen subway part of it. On the south side, obviously, their biggest concerns were property impacts that affected their parking and their access that's right now right next to the intersection. And so they asked for a few different things from us to try to tweak if it was a roundabout, can you address these things and try to improve this off of this layout? One was adding a right-in at some point during that block, which we need to look at how close that could be to a roundabout. And then also maximizing any parking, obviously, in an impacted situation, trying to minimize that number of parking stall loss. There was a little bit of concern about sightline changes. You know, in general, businesses, commercial, are used to how it looks as a signal, and so as if it's a roundabout, are people still going to see my, you know, storefront? So and to address that, we created a rendering that you see here that showed that, you know, sightlines would still be as good or perhaps even improved from what's out there today when you talk about vehicles kind of angling straight towards your storefront as they come around the roundabout.
What was the specific feedback when when businesses saw this drawing? Because I actually think it looks like this could improve sort of ability for people to...
Yeah, I sent this to them after it was done. It was either a week or probably 2 weeks ago now, because I've been out of town. But and I haven't gotten a response directly related to that sightline concern. I think, you know, if they were satisfied, they just say, okay, yeah, that's fine. But they didn't come back and say we don't like it. But so we'll follow up. I'll follow up with them this week and just kind of get any outstanding concerns and that type of thing for a council action next week. But I think the sightline issue we kind of addressed and showed that, you know, really that's not gonna be affected here. That the metal squid in the center is just a placeholder to show that you could do something more interesting than a tree or something like that. And you'll see when we get to talking about the Arts Commission how that might come into play.
So this is a single lane, we're talking
This would be at Nicollet Avenue, would be a 2-lane
right.
on 66th Street, single lane on Nicollet.
Okay.
And really that just has to do with traffic volumes and
Kind of like we have at Richfield Parkway.
similar. Yeah, that one's even a little bit more of a hybrid, but this would be more straightforward in that 2 lanes would continue through east-west, 1 lane would continue through north-south.
Okay.
Anything else on Nicollet?
Oh, the only other outstanding one was down at Holy Angels, and was more focused on the land, obviously. He's kind of licking his wounds about the lost deal on that property, and so he wants to try to max out any compensation he might get for that property that they right away that we would need. Either way, really, signal or roundabout. And he, he's still looking at potential opportunities for that property that's currently zoned commercial and on the front area, and how would the roundabout fit in with that. So not a huge concern about the roundabout itself or any traffic or pedestrian operations, more about the property that he's focusing on.
Yeah.
Like to we did follow up a little bit on that driveway connection, the right in, right out. So you see that currently they have a driveway very close to,
This one? Or here?
right there. And so the question the landowner had is, can we leave a right in? They have a right in, right out now, but could that be saved? And I think under the two layouts, the road is widened to the point where I think that parking is already pretty narrow based on code. And so the diagonal parking is shown there on the north side of the building between 66th Street. Would match then as you go on around the building, there's one-way and diagonal parking. So I think the only way the parking would be able to be reestablished is one-way, and that right in would be counterflow. So somebody going eastbound right in would be going counterflow into a westbound parking lot flow. So I think that's the short answer, is that would not, be a fit that we could provide.
I agree with you on that, having been there and watched it, where people get rear-ended because people are just getting through the intersection, all of a sudden somebody dies in there. And so I agree with you, and they probably could pick up a couple parking spaces by not having that driveway there, so their loss for losing the driveway would be a gain in parking. And again, that's not something where people cruise through a lot, it's more of a destination dining. And, so I could see where it'd be better just to have that closed and give them the parking space to it, so.
Mm-hmm. Anything else?
Not here.
All right, am I going backwards? Lindell.
Lindale, we did get a meeting set up with all four quadrants. Down at I'll start at City Bella because that's not commercial. So, well, I guess there is commercial there, but the meeting itself was with the property owners cooperative that they've got there. Gave a presentation, and I would say in general there was quite a few concerns going into the presentation, and after they saw the layout and how it worked, and really the strong reaction was to those push-button RFBs and how that would work. I heard all positive comments after the presentation, but again, that strong desire to make sure that those push buttons are on all four quadrants, which the Transportation Commission confirmed at the January meeting.
Mm-hmm. They actually restated that in a letter that we received that you don't know about today. That they sent a letter today supporting roundabouts. I think, Patrick, you'll get one if you haven't already. And then, that's news too.
So yeah, other than that, I mean, obviously that quadrant is probably, well, that and the kitty corner across the way are pretty minimally impacted in terms of right-of-way. There's not any impact to the City Bella property. So it was really just about, how do we, as an older community, make sure we can get across that area just fine. And they also actually have stated that they are concerned that at a signal, people will turn into their back parking trying to kind of avoid the signal, so they see some advantage if it operates better than the signal traffic-wise, that they will limit that. But that was really the main comments we got from them. Moving north, that quadrant, they again are impacted on that corner for parking. They're looking in the future if there's anything they can do as the other quadrants all redevelop and across the street has new buildings out front, what could be done there, and they just want to make sure that whatever is put in, signal roundabout, doesn't hamper their ability to do something out there. And then
I don't think I've ever seen them use it for over there far as stacked snow or when they have their vegetable stand in the summer. I mean, if you really go by, I know they encourage their employees to park there, but they do that just to clear up the rest of the lot, so I'm not sure that would be a huge impact on them.
Right, and again, specifically that property and then the Lindale Station across the street really honed in on the access potential that creates, because their right in, right out situation would become more of a full access type situation where from any direction you could get into the property, and from any, you could leave and go any direction, even though those driveways are right in, right outs. So jumping across the street to Lindale Station, we've, as you can see, made sure we accommodated the new building going up, and their patio and walls that are out in front. They actually came into the meeting and said, first things out of their mouth was, we like roundabouts. So their biggest thing was going back to their tenants and getting feedback from their tenants, because as property owners and property managers, they really like how it was working. And then the final one was Woodlake Center. I was looking at it just now, that they had formalized their comments in a PDF that I would say in general they see the positives of the roundabout. Their main concerns really focus on, they had plans to kind of redo that front corner. They were going to put in a new monument and new landscaping, and then they wanted to do some bump out parking on Lindale. And so their main concern is, we have these plans to do this now. Would we delay them? What would be done as part of the project versus private costs? And really, it's all about, a compensation timing thing. They don't want to, so at least we'll know one way or the other here in the next couple of weeks, but their main thing was, we had these plans, we were going to move forward, and now we have to kind of slam on the brakes to see what happens. So it really wasn't their access really doesn't change, because they've got a full access down to the east. So their main thing was that corner, and how does it affect their plans?
Just one question, I've seen the dialysis there, people parking on the sidewalk and that. Would it be possible to actually have a short-term drive up there for people who are going to Sister Kenny and dialysis?
We looked at bump out parking on 66th Street as part of the project, but really it just didn't work with having the bikeway and the sidewalk and the boulevard. That parking along 66th Street just wouldn't work. That Lindale, it's not shown here, but accommodating off-street or on-street parking on Lindale would look a lot like it does across the street. And so that would totally be part of,
I could see
whether it's a signal or a roundabout, they have plans to put in bump-out parking there. So that's all the 4 quadrants there.
Yeah, anything else?
Oh, and then, again, similar to Nicollet, we did a rendering to kind of show those properties, how that really would transform that whole intersection from what's out there today. It's pretty concrete, pavement centralized, and it would really change the face. We just did some, sketching of what, if there were storefronts up on the corner. And then you also see the RFB, those push button lights, that would be a part of the crosswalk. Finally, 66th Street, as we mentioned, the biggest concern on Emerson was for the access changes. The landowner on the north side, again, was generally neutral. It was hard to gauge exact response. First reaction, there was things good and bad about it. But like we mentioned, there's a potential to minimize that impact and also to improve that alley alignment from the 90-degree bend that's there today. This is just the traffic patterns we talked about.
Yep, so, okay. And then MnDOT, so this is about the 35W ramps. They have, sounds like they're good with the roundabout, and they're good with the full access at Emerson, if it's a signal. High traffic operations. Oh, is this your slide?
Well, Jack
Or,
we didn't send that out. Did you send that out while I was gone? That video?
no.
Okay, we'll follow up with that link. One of the questions we got from the public in general, but in some of these meetings where, especially it was brought up at the Community Services Commission meeting, but the number of pedestrian crossings. Everyone sees Nicollet and the number of people that cross there. It's also the highest boarding area for Metro Transit in Richfield. So there was concern about, with that high number of pedestrians, how is that, does that hinder the traffic operations of the roundabout? And Jack had found a video of a situation in Canada, which was actually a 3-lane roundabout next to, is it a college or high school?
High school.
High school, so there's a high number of pedestrian crossings, and we'll send out the link for that video, but the main thing is, yes, there's, the pedestrians affect the traffic operations, and in this particular case, they have live crossing guards, so a person standing there that kind of stops traffic. It would be very similar to if you push the button and it signalized your intent to cross. The only difference is somebody saying, hey, there's somebody that's going to cross. And so the compliance was really good in terms of traffic yielding. And as the platoon of people crossed, you saw the traffic back up into the roundabout. As soon as the pedestrian platoon finished crossing that segment, the traffic cleared out, and within 5 to 10 seconds, the roundabout was back to fully operational. So that concern that it would affect traffic in the short term, yes, it does, but it immediately clears out because it's an efficient operation.
Just a question, has anybody ever done a hold? Like if on the other side of the roundabout, so the other traffic can't get to them to keep the roundabout clear, if you want to call it that? Has anybody ever done a,
Right.
like where you stop that?
So it's stopped on the other side.
Yeah, they're going to go straight through.
Some of that happened in the video naturally just because of the way the cars are wanting to go. And other
It's
times,
kind of like, you get a gridlock, if that roundabout's stuck, everybody's stuck.
right.
So,
Yeah, Bill Kleinbeil's in the back of the room. Bill and I did some roundabout work up in Detroit Lakes. Anybody familiar with Detroit Lakes and all the major events they have in this small little town? WeFest, there you go. So you are familiar. So in the roundabout design, this was an issue. We worked with the traffic enforcement, and yes, it would be overtaken. There's a balance to roundabouts. And so you're right, all you have to do is enforce one leg to stop them and let the other legs go. So yeah, there would be under like extreme conditions, but that was the basic design for WeFest traffic was to actually, all you have to do is stop one lane of traffic
so
and
there's a traffic cop or whatever.
it all clears.
Okay.
We don't see that being an issue at Nicollet.
Yeah, no, I was just saying, if anybody had a design like that yet, when the lights are activated, it puts a red light for the people trying to go through.
Yeah.
It kind of would resolve that problem, and maybe that's a next step. that
Yeah,
somebody-
if your pedestrian volumes got very high where that became an issue, it's something you could look at. But
Okay. Community groups, these are the different community groups that we've spoken with. Do you have any comments from these guys specifically?
Well, I'll let, Jack was the one that reached out to Cedar Point and all the businesses within Cedar Point because the roundabout is their main entrance and exit out of that, out of Richfield Parkway. But Mike met with Richfield Rotary, so I think it was more of a presentation. I don't know how much feedback he got. The Richfield Bike Advocates, they gave comments pretty early on in the process about roundabouts, and they did an internal poll and found that majority of their members or people that responded to the poll publicly liked biking through roundabouts, especially if it was the facilities that we're showing with the cycle track. But interestingly enough, some of those respondents liked the fact that they could take a lane and get through with minimal delay, any time of the day as opposed to a light where they're, similar to a vehicle driver where you, midday especially, I don't want to wait for a light or cross against a red.
Going out and around.
That you see that concern about crossing against red lights. So in general, they were favorable. And then, Jack, if you want to mention some of those comments you got.
So I reached out to almost all of the businesses at the Cedar Point development. Their whole existence has been associated with access off a roundabout. I got zero negative feedback on the roundabout, so about half of them were neutral. It's just an intersection. I don't see how it affects my business. And then the positive support went all the way to extremely positive. And a few of them did share how well their business is doing. John's here. I don't know how much turnover has even been occurring in that development. It's extremely stable and very successful, from the Target to several of those other stores. And so just in those short survey questions, I asked them specifically, how do you feel the roundabout is affecting your business? Again, no one said it was a negative. About half said it was basically neutral. It's just an intersection. And I would add to that then the liquor store operation. I think he's expressed his support of how he feels that's worked. Again, somebody who didn't think it was a good idea at the beginning. And so that's basically what I learned from those existing businesses.
Can I make a comment on that Cedar Liquor Store? I think I talked to him, and he said the only thing he wished is we had a roundabout on the other side of the highway, so those coming out could actually do the U-turn and get back, because now they have to do the left turn light and hook it. They can't turn at the first light because it's restricted. They have to go across the highway, and it'd be nice to have a roundabout on the other side of the highway so they can zoom through.
And if somebody has to go through those lights several times a day, I wish they were roundabouts too. Those are horribly timed lights.
Yes, they are. The public agencies that we've talked to, I don't know, MnDOT's approved, I've mentioned that already. Metro Transit is supportive, especially at Nicollet. They've been talking about that one since the very first meeting years ago. And I don't know, Hennepin County, I don't know if supportive is the word other than they're okay with it. But no, we don't have any reason not to move forward with this recommendation from any of the agencies. And our commissions, the asterisk commissions have made formal recommendations in support of the commission's recommendation for roundabouts. Did the community services happening on Tuesday, or did that happen?
That was
Did that just happen?
And Bill, that's where you came from, right?
Approved it on a condition that there be some education continuing after they're constructed.
Okay.
Washington County did something called Roundabout University.
Yep.
They kind of went out and informed folks of how they operate.
We had a video, you had to put it back on.
Did you want to mention something about the Arts Commission, Jeff?
Well, that one might kind of stick out compared to the other three, but really, when we talked about the corridor design guidelines that were created in terms of public space along the 66th Street corridor, the green circles, green ovals that we had in the intersections, those are areas where you have some additional space to do some things, whether it's wayfinding or whether it's public art or community elements. And certainly in the center of the roundabout, as we kind of did some placeholder type things, there's an opportunity there. So we wanted to go to the Arts Commission, not only to talk about the poetry on Portland that we brought up at the previous work session, but also to talk about, what some of the things that the roundabout might allow public art, sculpture-wise, that a traditional intersection doesn't. And so that obviously they really latched on to that type of thing, and not just at roundabouts, but along the whole corridor.
Can I make just one comment about the roundabout, ornamental grass? I don't know if you remember Richfield Parkway, it got a little tall. Yeah. So you might want to choose what you plant close to that sight line.
And I think that was we looked, when we were starting to get complaints, looked back at the planting plan, and it called for a miniature grass, and I think they planted the regular stuff. So they have to go out there every once in a while and chop it over.
Yep. So That's pretty much it for the presentation. This is in, this ad will be in Thursday's paper, Sun Current, to let people know that the decision is occurring. But other than that, if there's any questions or comments or anything else you want us to follow up on, or?
Just one, I guess the last question I'll ask is, does a different decision make a delay in the project at all? I mean, if we decide lights or if we decide roundabouts, is there a time delay in the project?
No, as long as the decision is made. So whether it's signals or roundabouts, I mean, the county's prepared to go either way.
Okay.
It's just delaying that decision that would be an issue.
Not deciding at all, okay.
Doesn't necessarily have to be all.
No, that-
Mix and match.
The staff reports that's being prepared is 3 different separate resolutions.
Okay. Okay, I guess if there's no further question or comments, I'll move to close, and we'll close the meeting.
Thank you.